The Nuggets serve notice that they're more than just Nikola Jokić in a win over the Pacers without Joker. Plus, a look at the Western Conference and exactly where Denver is starting to place itself for seeding purposes. All that and more on a late night Saturday, Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your weekend. Appreciate you guys being with us as we kick it on a late Saturday night. If you're joining us, I really appreciate you guys being with us. And man, I can't believe the chat's already popping. You can make us your first listen. We appreciate you doing so. And you can do so on all platforms. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, where you can leave a 5-star review. You can hit us up on YouTube and join the show and join folks like Hurricane, Jonathan, Jake, and John Steichen and Joe Cianzamino and Big Honey hanging out with us on a Saturday night, recapping the win over the Pacers without Nikola Jokić. Glad to have you guys with us. It will not be that long of a show tonight because we'll have another show on Monday recapping the Pacers game. Adam will be back for that one. I want to go ahead and give you my thoughts on the Pacers win. And a few other thoughts kind of on the general sentiment of where the Nuggets are. We'll also talk about the Western Conference and some of the stuff that I've heard as far as trade talks in the Western Conference, how that's going to influence things over the next couple of weeks, and a look at a not great conference. The Nuggets have a real good chance of being able to separate themselves from the rest of if they're able to handle things on the road over this next couple of weeks. So let's go ahead and get started here with a talk about the Pacers win. So the Nuggets win 134-111. No Nikola Jokić. He sits out with hamstring tightness. So, of course, let's talk about the first thing off the bat here, which is Nikola's absence. So not related to the wrist. Popped up on the injury report, questionable with a hamstring tightness. And then he sat out this game. Coach David Adelman, who is once again filling in for Michael Malone, who continues to be in health and safety protocols, was asked after the game about Joker status, about what's going on. He says, it's not a big deal. It's not serious. He wouldn't commit to Joker playing on the Sunday's game versus the Thunder. We'll talk a little bit about that in the last segment. It's not serious, but like the training staff wasn't like, yeah, he should be back in the next one. Adelman wasn't able to say that. Like, that's not his decision. And so he wasn't able to kind of give that indication. But it doesn't sound like it was anything serious. It's actually a really good thing that they went ahead and sat him, that he wasn't available. Hamstring tightness, the problem is, like, if you do not rest it, your odds of re-injury are very, very high. And you tear that hamstring, and that's going to be several weeks. So really good thing. That they were able to get him rest and that they can be cautious. They have enough of a lead to do this, and that they can get wins without him because, quite frankly, the rest of the Nuggets absolutely tore the Pacers' doors off. Now, look, the Clippers win was kind of thought of as like, the Clippers screwed around and the Nuggets took advantage. The Nuggets are just a really good team. And I will kind of note this. There is a sentiment, if you talk to the players, that while they love Nikola and they value Nikola and they know what Nikola does for them and they know how important he is and they know he's the MVP, this team has a lot of good players on it. And oftentimes when you have a player as dominant as Nikola, everything gets boiled down to just him. And that can really be, 1, disrespectful, 2, insulting, and 3, generate a lot of bad will. Not towards the player, but towards the media and the general reaction to these ideas. The idea of like, wow, how'd you get it done? You didn't have Nikola. Well, we're professional NBA players and we're pretty good. And I make $35 million a year. So we're actually pretty good. And that definitely, I think, is kind of shown through here. Look, you got a lot of great performances in this game. Jamal with 17 points, 10 rebounds, 14 assists in his first career triple-double. Quote of the night came from Jamal after the game where he says, well, Joker's always stealing mine. So, and I thought that was just like a really great line, talking about Nikola stealing his potential triple-doubles. But a great performance by Jamal to set the tone. He came out scoring early and then looked to set up teammates. Aaron Gordon with 28 points, 5 boards, 6 assists in just 30 minutes played. of field and 1 of 2 from 3-point range. Michael Porter Jr., 8 of 14 from the field, including 3 of 8 from 3. So by my math, that is, yes, 5 of 6 from 2-point range for MPJ, and he hit 3 threes, 19 and 8 in this one. Bruce Brown chipped in 17 points on 7 of 11 shooting, 2 of 4 from 3. The Pacers are not good without Tyrese Haliburton. They don't. It does kind of show you like what Tyrese does for them in terms of bringing it all together and making that team work. Again, the Nuggets could have lost this game if they didn't have the right approach to it. What you're seeing is the benefits of not only that, like Nikola empowers this team to share the ball and makes all the reads and it fits the style, but the Nuggets' identity is very much a team that plays this way. And it was on display on Friday night at Ball Arena, where like they're just Aaron Gordon is whipping passes, Jamal is whipping passes, MPJ is making the extra pass, Bruce Brown's making the extra pass, just constant pressure by moving the ball against a defense that wasn't prepared. The Pacers want to play at a really fast pace. And David Allen said before the game, we got to be careful not to get caught into being sloppy and just run up and down and pick up. The Nuggets didn't do that. The Nuggets played good defense, got stops, and then ran the ball down their throat and they were in constant attack mode and had the Pacers on their heels, which when you have a team missing its best player, on the road in altitude at the end of a West Coast road trip, that's a really good opportunity for them to do so. And they really took advantage of it. It was a great game plan. It was great execution. And it was just a really great night that the Nuggets were able to put together. Bones Highland did suffer an injury, a finger dislocation. And so finger sprain. He's also listed as questionable for the game on Sunday. Christian Braun, phenomenal minutes, got some run in this one, 10 points, 4 or 5 from the field. I want to be very, very clear and I'm going to have to say this multiple times in terms of my approach on Christian, which is that if Christian is needed, Christian can play. When Christian plays, he's going to play well. Christian Braun's going to have a great career. There is not room in the rotation with everyone healthy for Christian Braun. Someone has to not play. And that's going to be Christian a lot of nights, but that is not a reflection of how good Christian is. It is simply about how good the rest of the team and what they bring to the table is. Because the only guy you can really say like that you could sit is Bones, and then you don't have another lead ball handler. You've only really got Jamal, and then I guess maybe Bruce if you want to play him at backup point. And that might be a good way to go about it, and they may do that in the playoffs. But a lot of times Christian's not going to play, and that's okay. And you need to really remind yourself that it's okay because the Nuggets are genuinely the best team in the Western Conference. Record-wise, net rating, all of these types of things. The Nuggets are the best team, I think, in the NBA right now. I think they are certifiably the best team in the league. Like, Brendan Vogt of DNVR, by the way, you should check out the DNVR pre- and post-game shows before every Nuggets game and daily, had a really good comment about watching this team, which is that, like, how awesome is it to just watch this team every night? Like, you get to come and watch this team, which is media. Like, it's a job, right? We're covering stuff and you can get spoiled on it. You can, and I try and keep that in mind because tickets are ridiculous. The NBA outprices its fans and it makes me livid. But like DMAC from 1043 was also kind of echoing this, where he was saying like, sometimes you're like, oh man, I don't know, like it's Friday, it's cold and all this stuff. And then you get here and you're just like, God, this team is so much fun to watch. And they're that way even without Nikola. And that's really impressive that everyone is bought in, locked in, playing together. Adam always talks about wanting to compare this team to the 2014 Spurs as like a model for like the ideal of what they can accomplish. They're playing the right way no matter who's on the court. That's a good sign towards that, because that's how the Spurs played, is that no matter who was on or off, they played Spurs basketball. This is what Malone's always kind of talked about. And honestly, there's a little bit of an eye roll from folks like me when he's like, well, it doesn't really matter who's on the court. We play Nuggets basketball. And you're like, okay, but really you're talking about Jokić. I mean, it's not like, I'll just say like, it's not true right now. Like they genuinely are playing Nuggets basketball. Whoever's on the court, they're playing Nuggets basketball. Now they were overwhelmed in terms of like the Pacers being overwhelmed by what they were able to bring to the table. The Nuggets shot 50% from three, hit 14 threes, shot 61%. Like listen to these splits for a full game: 61, 50, 69. And Jamal went 7-7. Like their only misses were Aaron Gordon, who went 5 of 9, Jeff missed 2. And that's pretty much it. Like everyone else hit their free throws in this game. So they are executing at such a high level, and there needs to be a strong recognition of how good this roster is. Not just Nikola, though he is going to be the 3-time MVP if as long as he's healthy and keeps this up the rest of the way. But genuinely, like, you need to appreciate how good the whole roster is and how they're playing together. Like, no one's playing selfish. No one's doing this. Like, no one's doing things that are freelancing. They've just been absolutely phenomenal. So a great win because it was without Joker, a pretty boilerplate, like expected win. This Pacers team is not good. We'll talk about the Thunder game in the last segment. That one I think is going to be a different type of challenge. But first, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the Western Conference and what the kind of landscape is for Denver and where it sits as we enter this stretch before the All-Star break. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Saturday night. The chat is bumping as always, so make sure you go to YouTube, turn on the notifications, subscribe, hit all that stuff, so you can join the show and hang out with us. So I want to talk a little bit about the Western Conference and what I've heard as far as trade stuff and where the Nuggets stand. So obviously the Nuggets at the top of the Western Conference. Memphis finally loses. They lose by a point to the Los Angeles Lakers in Los Angeles in a really ridiculous game full of a lot of drama. So now Nuggets have a 1-game lead for the Western Conference after winning their 9th in a row. The longest winning streak, by the way, of the Malone Jokić era. That's the longest winning streak they've had in this time. I will continue to tell you, there's been a lot of I understand Nuggets fans being like, is Memphis ever going to lose? I'll tell you this, Memphis isn't quite as good as their record says. And I say that as somebody that's kind of partial to them. They've had a home heavy schedule as of late when they've really surged, and and when they've been on the road, they face bad teams. They run those teams out the building with their transition attack. When they start to face a little bit more of a tough one, now you can say who's really tough in the league. That's a fair point. But I do think probably that Memphis's margin for error isn't as high, as large as it may have appeared over the last couple of weeks. If we look at the Western Conference as far as trade stuff, here's what I can tell you is Sacramento, I think for the most part, is looking to stand pat. They're pretty set with where they're at. By the way, they lost again, so the Nuggets now have a 6-game lead over the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. By the way, that's crazy. They already have a 6-game lead in the loss column over the 3 seed. That's setting up beautifully for Denver to get a top 2 seed at worst. The Pelicans also starting to sag a little bit. Pelicans, I also don't think are probably a trade target. I don't think they're going to necessarily make a move. They know that it's just basically look, if we get Zion and BI back, we're pretty well set. I wouldn't be shocked if they moved one of the young guys, getting minutes for Herb Jones, who's taking a big step back this season. Trey Murphy and Dyson Daniels is tough, and so they may look to consolidate. I think it's probably more of an off-season project or mid-season next year. But I would be surprised if there's any sort of major change up with the Pels. Dallas is probably going to make a move. Dallas has a lot of options on the table. Tim Hardaway Jr. I'll also say this. I've mentioned this before. THJ has been used as a floater option with teams to be like, hey, are you interested in THJ? And they'll get a sense of what they're offering. Okay, well, we offer somebody better. I still think that THJ probably gets moved, but they'll definitely, I think, look to add somebody. Dallas is still very dangerous. You still need to kind of consider Dallas as a long-term threat just because of the way they match up with Denver. But I don't think there's any I don't see Dallas making a move that suddenly vaults them into a top 3 seed or competes with Denver in terms of overall quality. It's more of a matchup thing. The Warriors, another tough loss. They did get a good win versus the Cavaliers on the back-to-back without all their starters. Finally, a road win for them. They're 500. They are now 10 games. Again, think about this. Your Denver Nuggets are 10 games up on the Warriors in the loss column halfway through the season. That's nuts. That's very nice. I have the Warriors under and the Nuggets over, and I didn't expect that. Golden State, I think will probably look. I would tell you this. Golden State's been a lot more active than actually has been reported through the years. Like they look at a lot of options. Their front office is pretty aggressive in terms of garnering calls. It's just that they very rarely make a move. It's a very Spursian approach. The Spurs actually make a lot of calls. They just nothing ever gets out. And whenever they're like, they just don't wind up doing anything. But they are active in terms of looking at things. And I was actually say that the Warriors have gotten further in talks, according to what I've heard, at least, than San Antonio has and some of these other teams. So look, Golden State needs to be active. Like they need help. They need reserves. And I think that they know that. The question is going to be, how far are they willing to go to get Steph the help he needs? Moving one of the big guys would be there's a lot of consequences that come with that. I would tell you, I would be surprised if it's off the table. I think that they're probably like understanding of the only way to sustain the run long term is probably to move one of them. They're not trading Steph Curry. So we'll see what's happening. But I think we'll see what happens as it kind of goes along. Zamora is starting a podcast. That's exciting, Zamora. The Wolves, again, I don't necessarily see as trade. Tim Conley may try and make a move around the margins, but I don't necessarily see anything big coming. Unless things are way worse in Minnesota than we realize. Trading, like when you haven't had Towns, like you haven't been able to figure out if it works because you only had like a month of it and it didn't work then, but you need more than a month to figure out Edwards, Gobert, Towns. Russell, they will look to move. Like they've been looking to move Russell. They will continue to look to move Russell. D'Angelo Russell will be on the trade block. There's a number, like the Heat were mentioned the other day as a potential team for him. I wouldn't be surprised if they made a move if there was something to be done with like D'Angelo Russell for Kyle Lowry. That would make a lot of sense, right? Like you bring in another veteran, you're trying to win now. You move D'Lo. You're buying low on a veteran, and that's tough. It's got a lot of money attached to it, but you trying to find value for D'Lo is kind of difficult. So I wouldn't be surprised if those conversations kind of talk. Clippers are aggressive. Clippers are really looking to make a move. They want to back up big and they want a point guard, and they've got a couple options on the table. I think that the Clippers wind up making a trade. I would tell you, I don't know, the baseline for any team making a trade is like 30% in a 3-week span. I would tell you that the Clippers, I would put closer to 45%. That's still high compared to everybody else, but it still means it's more likely than not that they don't make a trade because trades are hard. So that's kind of where I get to on the Clippers there. Jazz, I think that Malik Beasley probably gets moved, and he's the only one. I think everybody else they're going to kind of write it out with. Suns are looking, but they only want big swings. The Suns are not looking for like a little marginal move. If they eventually have to trade Jay Crowder in like a small move, they will. Like they've tried to drum up some interest from some teams, including, I believe I've heard Portland actually is a potential Jay Crowder destination. So your old friend, the Blazers, continue to add, wing depth there. But the big key here is really, honestly, that Denver really has separated itself, and they're going to have to stabilize. They've got road games coming up. Everyone's really worried about the Pelicans, Bucks, home back-to-back. It's a back-to-back, so that's tough, and they may have to rest guys on one night or the other. What I will say is that the Pelicans are in a really rough spot right now. If you've been paying attention, the Pelicans are 3-7 in the last 10. They were doing okay for a while without Zion, but it's fallen off. They faced some tough teams, but Denver's a tough team, and their margin for error is just very, 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 very slim without Zion and BI. They don't have anything to augment it. They have to have a lot of things go right. And if CJ's not hitting shots, they're sunk. If they can't get stops with the backup, with the starter unit, with Jonas, they're kind of doomed. Fernando asked a good question. Do you think the Nuggets look more towards the buyout market than the trade market? I could see that happening, if only just because, like, if there is a veteran guy that makes a lot of sense as like an addition, but you have to understand how many of their guys they have locked up right now. Right? It's like they can clear a spot, but they like the guys that they have. Like they like Jack White, like Peyton Watson's on the long-term deal. They have like a long-term plan for him. They believe in Colin Gillespie. Like there's not a lot of room for guys to move. And if you say, like, well, they could dump DJ, I would just tell you that I don't think the team would be better off for that. That's how good he is for the vibes. It's how good he has been as a locker room presence. His performance versus the Pacers, he was terrible the first 5 minutes, and then he was pretty good the rest of the game. Like once he settled in after not playing for a long time, DJ was actually fine again. He was terrible that first 5 minutes, but ultimately it was kind of okay. The buyout options are pretty limited. I'll tell you this. Like, Eric Gordon's not getting bought out. He'll get traded or he'll hit free agency. I'm trying to think who else is kind of in that list. Maybe some of the Charlotte guys. Maybe somebody asked in the question earlier above. I was asking about sellers. The only team that's known to be selling, and it's not even selling, it's more just like available guys, it's the Hornets and the Raptors. And like the Hornets will make you a deal. The Raptors are still like, hey, can we get OG Anunoby? Sure. Do you have 5 picks? And there's a report the other day that it was like 2 picks and a good player and a good young player. I don't think that that's all it would wind up being. I think that's like the starting place, and then Masai would keep pulling more. I just think they're trying to get a deal for anybody that's not Fred VanVleet. Fred VanVleet, I think, gets moved, but I think they're trying to get a deal for any of the others. So maybe if you're thinking about this might be like the upside is that if you're worried about OG and you're like, we can't get OG, is somebody going to get OG? I don't know that anybody's got the trade assets to get him. So something to kind of consider there. Let's take a break. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the Thunder game and why I'm a little bit concerned about this one, as well as a conversation about trying to manage the rest of the season health-wise. We'll talk about that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and being a part of the show again. Appreciate you guys being with us. Adam Mares will be back on Monday, and we'll talk about the win over. I already said it's a win. We'll talk about the game versus the Thunder. I'm not sure this is going to be a win. I'll tell you why. Couple of factors here going against the Nuggets for their game versus the Thunder. One, last game before a road trip, I think is pretty difficult. You've been home all this time. You've had this long extended homestand. You're going on the road. You're focused on you in the back of your mind. You feel like we got Pelicans and then Bucks and we got this, and you're trying to deal with all of that. You've got OKC coming in, who it's like OKC is always this perfect team in terms of they're good enough to give you trouble, but not bad enough to warrant your attention, which is why they are the best team against the spread the last 3 seasons. They are just really good at managing all of those kind of ins and outs of like managing that wavelength. So OKC, like, they're playing really well right now. If you look at their last little bit of games, they're 7-3 in their last 10. They're winning outright. Like, they are winning games. They've gotten back into the race here. They've gotten back into the playoff race. And Michael Malone did describe them as playing them as like a root canal earlier this season. So they're going to play pretty tough. The other thing is the injury report. Bones is questionable with that finger. Jamal's questionable with injury management for the knee. And Nikola is questionable again with the hamstring. If Nikola is not, now look, if it was a playoff game, last game, does Nikola play? Yes. If it was a playoff game tomorrow, Sunday, when you listen to this today, would he play? Yes. But it's not. And so you kind of have to manage these things. And this is one of the great things about them getting off to this lead, right? They have the ability to do this now. Like, it is okay for them to basically be like, there's still a good enough chance for us to win this game that we can rest guys and then have them ready later. But the Nuggets get to be a little bit more focused on health now. There was a good question. I think Ryan was the one that asked it about kind of getting ready for the postseason. Like, how do you approach, like, okay, you've done all this work, you've gotten this lead, you're at the top of the conference again. Like, I just can't get past this, that they're 11 games up for the 7 seed. Like, the play-in is not even in the rear view. It is over the hill and far away and behind some trees in the rear view. So you can't really be all that concerned about it. So you get to kind of focus on your health and you get to focus on making sure that you're healthy and just kind of getting through stuff. I tried to get Aaron to answer a similar question. I asked him, I was like, what's next for this team? I was like, you've accomplished all this. You've shown that you can play at this level. What's next? And he's like, gotta beat the Thunder. And that was it. So it wouldn't give me anything. So I'm a little concerned about the Thunder game as a trap game. I've said that before, and they've stomped teams, right? They've been unstoppable at home. That's definitely true. Like, they are literally unstoppable at home since the Pistons lost, or since the Mavericks lost, rather. They're 22-3 at home right now. That's absurd. The Boston Celtics are 18-5. Like, that's the best team in the league. They have a better home record than the best team in the league. They're tied with Memphis in terms of home losses, but it's just really impressive what they've been able to do at home. So should the Nuggets win, even if Nikola sits? Yes. What about if Jamal sits? Maybe. That gets a little dicey with how Shea's playing. But it is kind of tough to kind of see there. Orkanate says, when is the next real test? That's an interesting question. So if we look at the schedule coming up, Jake Morris hits it exactly on the head. The Bucks are playing terrible right now, and I don't know if Giannis is going to play. He has been in and out of the lineup with his knee soreness. It's getting to be a little bit concerning. So I don't even know. Like, they're likely to face the Pelicans without Zion and then the Bucks without Giannis. Like, that's entirely possible on that Tuesday, Wednesday back-to-back. But Jake says the Sixers, and that's right. The Nuggets play Wednesday, and then they have 3 days off before facing, they have 2 days off, Thursday, Friday, before facing the Philadelphia 76ers for NBA rivalry week on Saturday. That game is going to be on ABC. That is a national showcase game between Joel Embiid. By the way, the Sixers just swept a West Coast road trip 5-0. That's going to be a monster game. That's the next real test. Is the Sixers are a good enough team. The Sixers are a borderline top 10 offense-defense team. So that to me that's an East Coast, and as John says, day game. That to me is like the next big test for them. The Bucks, it's always a fun game, but I just don't know. Like, I don't know on either side who's going to be playing in that game. So we'll have to kind of wait and see and judge it when it gets there. Maybe a great game. Maybe it'll be an instant classic, but it is certainly kind of interesting how this is shaping up with Zion not playing on Tuesday, probably no Brandon Ingram, and Wednesday, possibly no Giannis. We'll see kind of what that looks like for them. They've got Philly, then they've got the Pelicans at home. I don't know if Zion will be back by then. I lean towards no. I think he's probably out through All-Star. And then the Nuggets on Thursday, February 2nd, have the Warriors at home. And so that's another one. Look, Warriors are 500 this year, and they can't win on the road and all these types of things. But eventually this team will go on a run. The Warriors their starting five has the best net rating in the league. It's still better than Denver's. That team's best unit, which doesn't have Jordan Poole in it, by the way, is definably the best in the league still. That has to be concerned. Sean asked a good question. He says, Matt, what about the Nuggets win profile now? Looks pretty damn good right now, it seems to me, handling business versus bad teams, division teams. Here's the deal. When you're 33-13, yeah, you know what? Your win profile looks pretty good because you've beaten everyone. 22-3 at home is phenomenal. Like, that's obviously going to get you a huge margin. They're also 9-3 in division. And if you think about it, they lost to the Jazz and the Blazers in the first 2 games of the season. Think about that. So they've lost one division game, that Wolves game on the back-to-back where they screwed around. That's it. They're 9-3 in division. That's by far the best record amongst their division teams. The Wolves are 6-6. The Blazers are 4-7. The Thunder are 3-6. So you've got like a healthy margin here between them. And then teams versus when you talk about the under 500 teams, which I always circle as a really important one, Denver's been great against both. Again, if you win a lot of games, you're going to have wins versus both. But they're 22-5 versus teams below 500 currently. So teams that are like below 500 right now, they are 22-5. The only team that has fewer losses, and that's what I really circle in on, is it's about avoiding losses to the bad teams. Believe it or not, in the West, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Grizzlies have 6. The Grizzlies have one more than Denver. The Kings have 5, so they're tied with Denver. And then you talk about like the other serious teams. Pelicans have 9. Mavericks have 11. Wolves have 13 losses to teams under 500. Clippers have 9. Warriors have 12. The Warriors are 12-12 versus teams under 500. So their win profile is excellent because they've beaten everyone. But it especially matters that they've been able to build up this kind of like confidence level. The fact that we haven't seen the Nuggets screw around and lose one of these games that frustrates fans so much, it is a testament to how they're playing right now. And I also think it's about, I asked Jamal this about, look, winning is always fun, but is it making getting through this part of the season easier if you're playing like this? And he said, absolutely. Like the guys, I was just saying, like the Nuggets love playing basketball right now. That's evident, like talking to them, like they love going to work and doing their job. It's not like, oh God, okay, fine. All right. They're not frustrated by their role. They're not frustrated by the style. They're all playing together. And that leads them to a whole other kind of level. THGR 201 says this: if the Nuggets somehow manage to win versus the Pels, Bucks, Sixers, and Warriors, would that send any sort of message to other teams about the dominance of Denver? No, because it would still be like, gotta do it in the playoffs. Doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want in the regular season. You don't want to send messages in the regular season unless it's to like one specific opponent to show that you have dominance over them. Like the Celtics want to keep reminding the Sixers, you can't beat us. Like that matters, I think, a little bit. I think Denver wants to send that message to Portland to a certain degree for various reasons, but I don't know that there's like a real, I worry about them playing too well because it's just like, man, it's hard to maintain this over the course of the season. I don't think they should play worse intentionally. I'm just saying it's hard to play this way. Brandon has any chance of Nikola playing tomorrow? I would say it's 50-50. I wouldn't be shocked if he played. It's like Nikola's going to have a word in it. Maybe like, I'm not missing back-to-back games. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it's like, we just really don't need you. It was described as an abundance of caution that he missed the last game. You'd think it's better, but you don't know how the hamstring is going to respond. So we'll see it. John says, I feel like the national media are going to keep saying the Warriors are going to be there right up until they lose in the first round in 5 games. Yes. I'll say this. When champions go out, they only kind of go out sad. And that you look back and the Mavericks swept the Lakers in 2011. People don't remember that, but that's what happened is Kobe won 2 titles, the 09 and 10 titles, and then the Mavericks swept them in 11. The Heat were on fumes when they made the finals, and then the Spurs destroyed them in 2014. This Warriors team, I think, is a little bit different. I think they do have a little bit more margin for error. What I will say is that history says that if you're not a top 4 seed, you're not going to win. This team being bad on the road does not bode well for them having to go on the road 3 times, right? So we'll see. I'm not willing to I'm not willing to be like, no, the Warriors. I'm not willing to count them out yet. I'm just not, because here's what I have. Every time that Steph, Clay, and Draymond have played all of the games in a series, they have not lost. Think about that. 2016, Draymond missed game 5. When they have Steph, and then 2019, Clay got hurt for the last one. When they have their 3 guys on the floor for the entire series, they have won the title. They deserve that level of respect. That's insane, but it's true. All right. I will say this too. Are we even peaking? They don't feel that way. They feel they can be better. Jokić said that repeatedly. That he really thinks that they have more, that they can play better. So that's something to consider. Whether or not they can remains to be seen. We got a long way to go. Don't get too high, don't get too low. But the Nuggets are in a great position, and you should enjoy this as Nuggets fans. Your team is the best team in the Western Conference. Your team is a title contender. Your team is the season that everyone wanted at the beginning of the year. Turns out they have it. They have the season everyone was hoping they would have at the beginning of the year when everyone was so stressed out. So keep that in mind. Enjoy your Sunday, everybody. Hope you guys have a great day. We'll see you guys again on Monday morning. Adam and I'll be back to recap the Thunder game. We'll have coverage for you over here. You can follow me on Twitter at HB Basketball. Make sure to check out the pre and post game show over at DNVR. Thanks for joining me on a Sunday night. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.